Okay, in this video, we're going to go over applying sine and cosine ratios. So previously, we had done tan. So you can see from the top here, now we have all, oops, sorry, get rid of that. We have all of these at our disposal. So let's read about this. Okay, if they talk about the sine of angle A, so where is angle A? Angle A is right here. So the sine is so sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Okay, so the sine of angle A equals opposite over hypotenuse. What does the cosine equal? Cosine is A over H. So we can say that the cosine of angle A is A, so that equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay, so they explained it here, and they used the two-letter approach to naming sides. So know that across from angle A is also little side A. Across from angle B is little side B. And across from angle C is little side C, which in this case is the hypotenuse. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill in some of these notes. Okay, sine. When you talk about sine of an angle, you're talking about the ratio for acute angles. Remember, we only use the acute angles, not the 90-degree angles. That involves a leg and a hypotenuse of a right triangle. And cosine is actually defined the same way. It also involves a leg and a hypotenuse. But sine involves the opposite leg, and cosine involves the adjacent leg. Okay, there's more vocab here that you definitely want to know. Okay, so let's build this little triangle right here. I'm going to build it, maybe I'll continue it in brown. Do you see this line right here from that boy's viewpoint? Okay, that line of sight. So this is the line of sight. Okay, so he's looking up. Here's the horizontal line right here that I just drew in. And when you look up from the horizon, that's called the angle of elevation. Look at this little girl on the hill. She's looking out here, but then if she looks down, that angle is the angle of depression. And guess what? Since this is parallel to this, the angle of depression equals the angle of elevation because those are alternate interior angles. We'll talk about that some more from our parallel line discussion. Okay. So here is the written explanation. The angle of elevation is the angle your line of sight makes with the horizontal line when you look up at an angle. Okay? So if here's your triangle, if you are standing here and looking up at something up here, right here is the angle of elevation. If on the other hand, you're standing here and you look down, I'm sorry, let me do that better, and you look down here, this is the angle of depression. Okay, so that's when you're looking down. We're going to use this extensively in word problems, but I just wanted you to have the vocab right now. Okay, so now we're going to find sine ratios. Find sine of S and sine of R. Okay, so let's do R in, let's do S first. We'll do S in blue. So from, let's do that better. Here's angle S right here. From angle S's viewpoint, this is opposite, and this across from the right angle is always the hypotenuse. So what do we know? We know that the sine of S, because now we have all of SOHCAHTOA, that is going to equal opposite, which is a value of 63, over 65. And that is your ratio. Let's change angles, and let's come from angle R. From angle R's perspective, this is the opposite. You see that? It's all the way across the triangle. So let's get that ratio. So the sine of R is going to equal opposite, which is 16, over 65. And that is the ratio. Okay, so this is this ratio, and that was that ratio. Okay, now they want you to find the angles. So take your ratio, and just like we did with tan, if you know that sine of S equals 63 over 65, move this sign over here. When you do that, it becomes sine -1 of 63 over 65. That goes in your calculator. And you should be getting an angle of 14.3 degrees when you round it to the nearest tenth. Oh, and I'm sorry, is that S? Hang on. Let me just put that in my calculator, because I think I had that wrong. Okay, so let me go second sine of 63 divided by 65, and I'm sorry, it's the other angle. So it's not this, as you could tell if you were to check my work. It's actually going to be 75.7 degrees. Now let's get R. Changing to red, I know that I had R to be this, so therefore, if the sine of R equals 16 over 65, if you want R by itself, you're going to move it over here. When you do that, sine becomes sine -1, because you're looking for an angle. And when you put this in your graphing calculator, or any kind of calculator, of 16 divided by 65, remember you're using inverse trig this time, then I'm going to get R is going to be 14.3 degrees. Now, what do you know about S and R? So S, let me put this in green, angle S plus angle R, they are complements, they have to be 90 degrees. And if you add angle S and angle R, you will get 90 degrees. Okay, so now they want to do the cosine angles next. So let's get that rolling. Okay, so let's label our triangle again. I'm going to use green this time, find cosine of W. So from W's point of view, I need cosine. And remember, you have all SOHCAHTOA now. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So from this angle's perspective, this is the adjacent. This is always the hypotenuse. So what do I have? I have the cosine of W. I want the ratio first. Equals adjacent, which is 24 over 30. Okay, now we're going to do it from U's point of view. From U's point of view, this is the adjacent. The hypotenuse never changes. So the cosine of angle U is going to equal 18 over 30. Now, if you want to get the angles, if I want angle W, W is going to be cosine -1 of 24 over 30. And if I put that in my calculator, and I say second cosine, 24 divided by 30, I get angle W equals 36.9 degrees. Now let's switch colors, and I want to do U. So u equals cosine -1 of the ratio that we established a moment ago. If I put that in my calculator, second cosine of 18 divided by 30, a second cosine gave me cosine -1, right? U is going to equal 53.1. And angle W plus angle U is going to be 90 degrees because those two angles are complementary. Okay, let's keep going. It says use a trig ratio to find a hypotenuse. Okay, so if you're going to use a trig ratio, I need one that's going to help me find the hypotenuse. Here's all my ratios, and what do I see? Two of them have h's in them, so I can only use these two to find the hypotenuse. Okay, so they gave me this angle of 35. So look at this angle, it's right here. I'm going to use, since they gave me the opposite, I'm going to use sine. So the ratio tells me the sine, and we'll call this angle P, the sine of P, I know is going to equal opposite over hypotenuse, right? Okay, what's the value of that? The value of it is 35 degrees. The sine of 35 equals opposite, which is what I have, the 11, over x is what they're giving me for the value of the hypotenuse. Okay, this is over 1. Cross products gives us x times the sine of 35 equals 11 times 1 is 11. Isolate your x by dividing by the sine of 35. And in my calculator, I say 11 divided by the sine of 35. And I'm getting that x is 19.2. Now look at the units. It is feet, so you should tack on feet at the end of your units. All right? So that takes us through this next page. Now, why did I do what I did? I could either use sine or cosine. To use cosine, I would have had to calculate this angle here so I can use the adjacent. So I didn't do that. I used what they gave me. And what went in my calculator? This went in my calculator. That's going to give me x. Okay, don't put things in your calculator too early. Do one thing in your calculator and the answer should be the answer that you need. Okay, so I did that using sine. Let's keep going to example 4. Oh, okay, it says find a hypotenuse using an angle of depression. Okay, so that you're looking here. Here's the horizon. This is your angle of depression. Okay, because you're looking down. Okay, what do I have? I have an angle. From that angle's perspective, I have opposite, I need hypotenuse. So let's do the SOHCAHTOA again. I have opposite and I need hypotenuse. I'm going to use sine. So the sine, 21, was 1200 over x. Cross products. Isolate your x. Divide both sides by the sine, 21. This goes in your calculator. In the calculator. Okay, so let's put it in. I have 1200 divided by the sine of 21. That's going to give me an x value of 3,348.5, and my units are meters. And if they give you units, you should answer with units. Okay, so that's my x. Is that a reasonable answer? I would say yes, because look at the opposite value, 1,200. The hypotenuse has to be bigger, and it certainly is. So I think that's a reasonable answer. Okay, let's continue. And we have another problem below this. So this problem says, a pilot is looking at an airport from her plane. The angle of depression is 29 degrees. I'm going to stop right there because you need more information. Here is the horizon. Okay, here is actually where your angle of depression is. But what do I know about that? That angle is actually outside the triangle that I want. So this angle is 29 because these lines are parallel, and these two angles right here, here, and here are alternate interior, so they are congruent. You may move your angle of depression down here inside the triangle. You cannot put it here. So I'm going to say not here, because that's the classic mistake. Okay, so given what I have, what do they want? How far is it from the airport? Okay, so the pilot's looking at the airport. This is where the airport is. So I need, well, let's see. That's where the airport is, but here's where the plane is. So when they look to the airport, they want to figure out what x is. Okay, so how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to say the sine of 29 degrees equals, here's your opposite, that's the 10,000, and it's going to be feet, over your hypotenuse. It's again a two-step problem, so cross multiply x times the sine of 29 equals 10,000. Isolate your x, and this goes in your calculator. When you take 10,000 and divide by the sine of 29, you're going to get your x value, and it should be 20,626.7, because we're rounding everything to the nearest tenth, and the units are feet. Make sure you can get that. We have one more problem. Now remember, you can stop the video and go back and make sure that makes sense to you. Don't just copy things down if they don't make sense, because that's a waste of your time. Okay, let's read this next one. A dog is looking at a squirrel at the top of the tree. Okay, so that means that the dog is here and the squirrel is up here. The distance between the two animals is 55 feet. That's why I know the dog is here and not here, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't have known. And the angle of elevation, so elevation's looking up, is 64. How high is the squirrel? So this is your x. That's how high the squirrel is. So this piece is your x. Let's do this first. Can we find x? Well, the angle they gave us, the acute angle they gave us, is 64 degrees. So from that angle's perspective, I need to find x that's opposite. So remember, you can always write SOHCAHTOA for yourself. You have to know what that means. So I can say the sine of 64 degrees equals opposite over hypotenuse. Okay, finally we have a one-step problem. So this is still cross products, okay? 55 times the sine of 64. By the way, make sure you always close your parentheses for your angles. It's just a good, safe practice to get into. Okay, to find x, which is how high up the tree the squirrel is, I'm going to put in my calculator 55 times the sine of 64. And I'm going to get that x equals 49.4 feet. So this is 49.4 feet. Then the next question is, how far is the dog from the base of the tree? That's y. So this is y. How do I get y? I would say the sine of, the cosine, let me go back. So I would say from the 64-degree angle's perspective, that y that I need is the adjacent. Okay, this is the adjacent. So I'm going to, and this was the opposite, okay? So I'm going to say, since it's adjacent, cosine of 64 degrees equals adjacent, which is y, over 55. Put this over 1, and it's a one-step problem. 55 times the cosine of 64 is going to equal y. Here's my calculator. Now I'm going to have that equal, y equals 24.1, and again, this is feet. So these are my two answers, and I've completed the problem. Okay? That's how far the dog is from the tree, and this is how high up the squirrel is in the tree. Okay, now this is the homework. So we've done all the notes. I was going to give you some pointers on the homework. So let's see what I was going to do. Oh, at the top of the page, I was going to go over labeling again. Because on the tan quiz, that was a problem. So if I have this right triangle, okay, and if I say this is P, Q, R, then the side opposite the R is little r. The side opposite the Q is little q. The side opposite the P is little p. The capital letters always pertain to angles, and the small letters, or lowercase letters, always pertain to sides. The only angles we ever use are the acute angles here and here. You will not be using the 90-degree angle for anything other than its only purpose is to let you know that this is always the hypotenuse. Okay, it never changes names. The other sides change names depending on which angle you're looking from. Okay, so that's something you have to definitely keep in mind. Okay, they wrote SOHCAHTOA like this. I like writing it like this. Sine of an angle equals opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine of an angle equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Tan of an angle equals opposite over adjacent. Okay, so if this says find the missing side, okay, you're going to look and see what's missing. Okay, so looking at this first one, that's a hypotenuse. That's a leg. Hypotenuse, leg, leg, hypotenuse, hypotenuse, leg. Make sure you understand what it is that's missing. And they say round to the nearest tenth. What does that mean? It means that your float equals 1, so you go to the nearest tenth, and your mode equals degrees. Make sure you're in there. The default on your calculators tend to be radians, so that's a concern. Okay, I will do this first one for you as an example. So this angle right here is 74 degrees. From that angle's perspective, this is the adjacent and this is the hypotenuse. Given that, I'm going to use cosine. And I'm going to say that the cosine of the angle, which is 74 degrees, equals adjacent over the missing x. Two-step problem. X times the cosine of 74 equals 11 times 1, which is just 11. Isolate x by dividing by the cosine of 74. Put this in your calculator, so don't grab the calculator until now. That goes in your calculator, and if I say 11 divided by cosine of 74, close your angle, I'm getting 39.9. So I have x equals 39.9, and I don't have any units, so I don't need to put any units there. Okay, this is my answer. Okay, so you should be able to get the rest, but I'm also going to give you all the answers. So your answers that you can choose from, or that you should have, are these, in no particular order. Okay, the rest of the page should have, and we did this one already, you should be able to check and calculate so that you get these answers. Okay, so let me just make sure. There's 8 problems, 2, 4, 6, 8 answers, and you already used this one. Okay, this one was the very first answer. We used that. So figure out the rest, see if you can get it. Then here's the second page of homework. So find angle A and angle B using inverse trig. Find angle P and angle R using inverse trig. Remember, inverse trig is just either sine to the -1, cosine to the -1. Those are your only options for this section. I guess I'll give you all. These are all the inverses, okay? You get that by hitting the second key. Okay, so give you some pointers here. This is a rope. From this angle's point of view, this is your adjacent. This is your opposite. And this is your hypotenuse. Okay, and guess what this angle is? That angle is the angle of elevation. Okay? So you now have a good setup. Those 2 pages are your homework. Complete all these problems and post this by the start of next class to Google Classroom. Okay, then we're going to do this next section, and that's the end of this chapter. Okay, this is solving for triangles using everything we've learned. Okay, so thank you for listening. I hope that helped. So I just noticed that the screen sharing may have stopped. So let me go back. I'm not sure where it stopped. But But I think you saw the whole thing about the squirrel. I gave you information about the homework. So here it is. If you need to copy this down, if it turned off before you got to copy that, please do. These are the answers that you're going to get for that whole section. We already gotten 39.9. I highlighted all the pieces that were required to be solved for. And then I told you you're going to use inverse trig to get your angles. And I illustrated this. So hopefully you now have everything you need. I'm sorry if that was confusing. But I know that it cut off at some point. Hopefully you have what you need. Thank you for listening.